Okay, tip number 4, please.
This is really stuffy, this one. Question, don't tell.
Oh, intriguing. Question, don't tell. Okay, tell me more.
So again, like this, we've had some slight disagreement. Not disagreement, but I think the way that different departments in our school do this is different. And like I know Adam is the king of modelling, and like the way that he models is ridiculous. But in maths, we try always, even when we're modelling from the front, to model through questioning. Because I think the idea is, and Adam's been like doing some CPD at our school, like talking about how you go from familiar to unfamiliar, or maybe concrete to abstract, or whatever it may be. But the familiar to unfamiliar fade, if you want, that's how math teaching works. You take some prior knowledge that is needed, that they should know, you make sure they've got it, and then you add a little bit to it based on logic. And so if you do that well, then you can do it through questioning, because it's only building on stuff that they've already known. Like, there are exceptions. Like when I'm first teaching algebraic proportion to, I don't know, year 10 class or something, I think it's just quite helpful to say this is general formula, specific formula. You model like direct proportion like this and inverse proportion like this, because it's all just a bit of a leap. But sometimes it's just better just to say like this is what's going on. But as a general rule, if you're teaching something for the first time, or modelling from the front, question them, don't tell. When you're helping a child one-to-one, like question always. Try like if you tell them, you've got no idea if they've understood. When students are working in groups, try and get them to question each other rather than telling each other. And I think the best way that I can like demonstrate why this is so important is everyone has had it where you've explained something, you've explained it really well, and to someone who's not understood it before, and you're explaining it, and you reach a point where that person you're explaining it to goes, oh yeah, right. And until I started teaching, I just assumed that meant they understood. But it turns out it's not true. Like, people make that noise all the time because it's become socially awkward for them to go any longer without understanding it. And like, honestly, like I do this to kids all the time. You say it and they go, oh yeah, and you go, oh right, I've got to stop there because you've just made that noise, which means that you think you understand, or you like want to communicate you understand. But and it's amazing how often they still don't understand, and that comes about because you told them rather than question them. Because when you're telling someone something, they like right now it could be happening. You could just be zoning off right now. I've got no idea. I'm not asking you any questions. I'm just talking. So yeah, like once I don't know. I find I do that all the time. As soon as something is not immediately interesting, there's a danger that my mind might wander a little bit, and I have to bring myself back. And I try to be self-disciplined about it, so hopefully I don't miss out on too much. But you know, like if you're dealing with children who aren't very self-disciplined, then there's no chance that they're going to bring themselves back, even if they're looking you in the eye, and even if your explanation's amazing. Which is why in our department we try to question always.
God, it's fascinating, this, Sammy. So I can certainly see it. Well, I don't do it enough, but I can certainly see how this is 100% a good idea if you're kind of working one-to-one with a child and you're trying to help them through something, and you want to get a sense of where the kind of gap is in their knowledge, where it's going wrong, so you build up and so on. The modelling is the thing that intrigues me here. Now, I'm interested with the kind of big leap things. That certainly seems to me the place where, you want the kind of crystal clear explanation and so on, because it's too big a jump and it's going to take too long for the kids to get there. Potentially misconceptions bombing around left, right and centre and so on. Can you give me an example of an idea, a new idea, where you could get all the way with questioning or most of the way?
Yeah, so... let's say if you're teaching dividing fractions
good one.
for the first time. So you start off by saying, like, I've got 8 pieces of chocolate here. If I have half of those pieces of chocolate, how many do I have? And you say, like, we've got 4. So you're questioning, this is a question, how many chocolate pieces? And so you then say, all right, so if I write down, 1/2 of 8 equals 4. And What's another way of saying that? How can, like, if I divided the chocolate into piles, like, what would I have divided 8 by to make my 4? Divided by 2. Okay, so dividing by 2, and we get 4. So let's look at these next to each other. And I said I've written down a half of 8, literally like that, and we taught them already that of in math means times. Yeah. Okay, so I've got half times 8, and so and when you're multiplying things, does it matter what order you multiply them in? No. Okay, so if I write 8 times a half, that's the same as a half times 8. Yeah. Okay, so 8 times a half is the same as 8 divided by what? 2. And 2 is the same as 2 over 1. And so what do you notice about dividing 8 by something and timesing 8 by something? What's the relationship here? Well, dividing by some fraction is the same as timesing by its reciprocal. And so, like, you're getting them to almost fill the gaps in the reason, the logic of where you've gone with it.
God, this is interesting, Sammy. Just again on the logistics, is that a lot of mini whiteboard stuff in response to those questions?
So this is another situation where, yes, mini whiteboards could do a job. I think the admin of getting the whole class to, if you're doing mini whiteboards properly, you're covering your answers, you're when you're ready, you're showing at the same time. And really, the questions are so constantly there that it's too. There's too much for mini whiteboards, so it's a situation where it's good to cold call. But sometimes I'll do like a whole class back and forth, because a lot of those questions the whole class could have said, and it keeps them engaged. I think it holds their attention and it holds them to account for being involved and listening to your model. Whereas if you don't do that, if you don't sometimes just stop and look at them expectantly, what's the next thing I'm going to say? Were you really following what? Because if you were following what I was saying, then you should know the next thing, because it's nothing that we haven't done before.
Yes.
All these things, it increases the likelihood they're going to be listening.
This is interesting, this, Sammy. I would imagine the difference between how me and you would do this, and I already think I'm in the wrong camp here straight away, is I think I'd do a lot of the explaining. I'd make sure I've got their attention and so on. I'd have really thought through, maybe even gone so far as to script or rehearse what I was going to say. Real crystal clear explanation, at least in my head anyway. And then once I've gone through that explanation, that's when the kind of assessment would start. I'd imagine by the time I've asked my first question of the kids, I kind of asked 5 or 6. Possibly I've got there quicker, but maybe you've unearthed more potential problems that the kids could have, and maybe your kids are more focused on it. I don't know, but I'd imagine that's our difference there, maybe.
First of all, it's not a good assessment for learning, as we've talked about, because if you're only asking one kid, then you don't know. But it is a good, the participation ratio. It is a better. I think the participation ratio will be higher if they know that at any point they could be involved in the model. I also just want to really make clear, I'm not saying sometimes or often or even always it might be a good thing to do a really clear model with no student involvement, and then immediately start questioning with the next one and do the guided practice. Fine. I think that still at that point you're sticking to the principle of question, don't tell.
Yes.
Once you've given them the knowledge they have. But if they have the knowledge to answer the question, then you should be asking the question, I think. That's my point.
That's interesting. And would you, if we just double back on tip number 1, because this is where it could really be derailed, right? So you're trying, picture the scene here, Sammy. You're trying to do dividing fractions. You want to get to the point where they've got this new idea. You're purposely asking the kids who you suspect might be getting this wrong. You can just imagine the kind of worked example going off the rails a little bit here. Are you still sticking to that principle at this stage?
Again, call it based on the situation in your class and the topic you're teaching. If you think it's doable, and if it's prerequisite knowledge that everyone should have, if your questioning is so clear, and the way you've guided them through it is so clear that they should be able to answer it, things like of in math means times, and 2 is the same as 2 over 1, those are they should be so fluent in that anyone could answer it, then it won't cause an obstacle. But you do have to think really carefully. But when you're first introducing an idea, you have to be so careful with that, obviously. And if there is a danger that they're not going to get it, and you think it's going to cause more harm than it actually helps deal with, then don't do it. But I think the time when it's most contentious to say question don't tell is when you're introducing like new information.
Yes.
So then from that, so I still think it can be done in the way that I described with the dividing fractions often, but like let's assume it can't be done and you have to give one clean, clear, concise model. From that moment on, it's only questioning. It's really only questioning. Don't do any of the heavy lifting or even the light lifting for them. Constantly question. And I honestly think one question done really well that takes 20 minutes, where you know every single person is with you because you've been checking from your whiteboards and you've been targeting the ones you'd like you to know, and you've really made them explain every single part of it. You've been jumping from student to student to student all the time. Like, that is way more worthwhile than doing 30 questions where, you know, maybe they can do it, but they can't explain why, or they, you know.
God, that's interesting. That's interesting, Sammy.